Hello YouTube, it's DasGregor, and welcome back to A Second Glance. Today we're looking at Manjaro, and notice that from the first time when I did this many months ago, a year or so ago, I mispronounced it and later found out that the J in Manjaro is not an American sounding J sound. But this is Manjaro 0.8.10 XFCE. Now, first off, I left this up here. This is the welcome screen for Manjaro, and it has some very good information with some new features about it, links to their wiki and README, forums page, etc. There's a lot of information that you can find from that, and I wanted to bring that up just to let you know that it is a nice feature to have when you first start a new OS or flavor of an OS. Now, Manjaro is an Arch-based distribution of Linux, and Arch is, I think, a pretty cool distro that's out there. Gen 2 is my flavor of choice, but I have to compile everything from source, which I personally prefer. I like to see when something doesn't work or if there's a problem with a package and get down to the source level to try to fix it. Now, if you don't like source code and you don't like compiling times and the amount of effort that it takes to manage a source-based distribution, Arch is the next best thing. Bin packages that you pretty much install from the ground up and set up. But when you're a new guy and you don't know quite what you want or where you want to go, but you know Arch is the way you want, Manjaro is a great way to start out in Arch. It gives you a working desktop with everything you need and allows you to dabble with it and still be able to install from the Arch repositories and also from the AUR, which I believe is the Arch user repositories. And it gives you a good beginning point. Now, with Manjaro, it was very easy to install. They have their own installer, which kind of reminds me of a customized flavor of the Ubuntu installer, at least in the beginning part, but then they had some special setups for the user IDs and security. It installed without any issue. It was very simple to set up my customized partitions so that I could work with them, and it gave me a few cool tools to play with to get started. As you can see on my desktop, for instance, I have a Steam icon, and Steam does work pretty much out of the box with Manjaro. You do have to, when you first set it up, agree, of course, to the EULA, and then it downloads a bunch of stuff and finishes the setup, and afterwards runs perfectly fine. If we look at the start menu, it's a little different. This is, by the way, XFCE, which is their flagship version. They also have KDE and a few other flavors we'll look at, but they also have a user-based community who have created other flavors that you can get to. In their menu system, it's quite simple. You've got your applications, though, on the left with your categories on the right. And if we look here, you'll see that they have their standard accessories that you're going to be used to seeing. And development, of course, I believe Qt4 is probably there because of installing Simple Screen Recorder. LibreOffice Math for Education. But that brings me to another point. For Office products, they have all the LibreOffice suite, along with XFCE's Office products, such as the calendar and globe time. It did come with the GIMP, and it sports Firefox as its main browser. Now, if you're an IRC person, it comes with HexChat, and if you're just a chatter in general, Pigeon for normal chatting. Thunderbird, of course, for your email. No real games other than Steam at this point, but everything can be installed using Pac-Man or other GUI tools, such as I think if we go into system, we can find very quickly some of those that are here. If I remember, I thought they said something about octopi or something else, but I don't see it off the top of my head, and I forgot to think about that until after I'm talking with you guys. To start up and shut down, it's interesting. You're not going to find it in the systems menu or anything like that right here, but they have some quick launch buttons for your settings, which is very, very handy to have. I like this up there, what they've done here with settings, your video, your switch users, and of course your log out button, giving you your options to do such. I didn't watch my previous Manjaro video, but I think I remember probably using KDE at that time because I kind of stuck with those sort of things. I wanted to try out what they considered to be the version that they liked the most, and since XFCE seems to be that, I threw that on here. I really like XFCE sometimes. I still tend to go back to KDE because I've used KDE since the 2.x days, and I like to stay with what I'm most used to. It's difficult for me within XFCE or Openbox or some of these others, even GNOME, to know where I need to go to set up certain things and to get things working. Whereas in KDE, I've been doing it for more than a decade, and it's pretty much simple and easy, much easier for me. If we go down here to the main box, if you look in the lower right corner here, you'll see we also have a power button here, our time, simple screen recorder, because we have that up, and then of course sound, networking, Bluetooth, and desktops right here. All very handy. And speaking of that, the network was very easy to set up. I always appreciate it when they have all the proper firmware, because while it's nice that you're being pure to Linux, there is a lot of firmware out there that people like to use that they didn't have a choice. For instance, in my laptop, what kind of a wireless card that the manufacturer put in, so you're stuck with that. And it's not fair, in my opinion, for certain groups to punish you because you were forced into using a proprietary style wireless that came with firmware that was closed source. Now, I know a lot of cases some people will say that, well, it's because of the space required, but I'm sorry. The firmware directory takes up so little space that it wouldn't be that difficult at all, and there are a lot of distributions out there that have every firmware possible so that it will work right out of the box without having to go and search. And the hardest thing is, of all things, you know, it's one thing to say, oh, we don't have that firmware for the joystick that you're using or that special webcam that you've got. But for goodness sake, give me the firmware for as many wireless drivers as possible. Do you know what a headache it is when the answer is go to the internet and get your firmware? Well, if this was my only computer, I'd be screwed, because guess what? I can't get the firmware to work for my wireless, so I can't get the firmware. I'm in this endless loop that won't stop. Anyway, my little rant. Yeah. I'm just thankful that Manjaro did a great job with that, and I appreciate it. There have been a lot of other distributions that I've tried that I've had to really work hard to get the wireless to work, and it's nice to have the internet and the access to anything I might need right away based on that without too much hassle. If we go to Firefox here, it brings up, of course, Manjaro's main website. They talk about themselves here. They have 32-bit, 64-bit versions, a rolling release based upon the Arch, a little bit about Linux over here. If you go over to the Get Manjaro, you will find that they have the XFCE version. They also have the Openbox and KDE. Now below here you will find that there are some other options in the community editions that you can get to, and there are things such as Cinnamon, I believe GNOME. Let me see if we can keep moving around here. If we go to the forums, for instance, I think that they may show for instance, here we have XFCE Openbox, and then of course Community Cinnamon, Gnome, LXDE, Mate. Although someone told me that Mate is actually pronounced Mate. I need to look into that. Enlightenment, and then I'm not sure, I haven't looked at others. But you have some choices to use. Arch is very flexible, very easy to use once you get used to the Pac-Man command line structure, or if you don't like command line, there are some GUI interfaces that you can use instead. Manjaro has been very good for me this week. Everything's been working well. I've really been enjoying it, and I would suggest, as if you're looking for Arch and you want to get your hands dirty, Manjaro might be a good way to go ahead and try that out. It definitely gave a kind of quick intro to Arch to myself, and that's one thing I have not even looked at. A couple weeks ago I did a Debian Vanilla 7.5, I believe, review, and that's the first time I've looked at just Debian by itself. Now, I've done Gentoo by itself. I don't think I've done Ubuntu by itself because I'm not crazy about Ubuntu. I will review Ubuntu-based distros. I just don't like the direction Ubuntu's going. But Arch is another one of those distros that I've looked at various spin-offs or things that are based on Arch, but I have not actually installed Arch for a Linux review and put it up there. Someday I really need to do that when I have some time to do so. As I stated in my last video, my work situation has changed. I was going to do a separate video and talk about it, and I said, you guys probably aren't. I thought about it. You guys aren't interested in that. The gist of it is, I work for a very large company, and we have a lot of IT in this state. And recently, they've gone through some drawdowns and layoffs, redactions, RIFs, reduction in forces, whatever you want to call it. And I am now the only IT support for my company for the entire state that I live in here in the USA, which means that I've got about 24 sites that are retail based out there, at least a half a dozen engineering sites, a corporate site in our main city, and a small call center. I think I have 2 small call centers. I don't have to deal with them too often, but it's a lot for one person. And I was quite concerned as to whether or not I would be able to continue to do these or have time for them. One must always focus on the career that pays for the hobby. The hobby doesn't pay for the career. And so I am going to still do my best to install distros, and if requests are made, try to follow those. Someone had asked about me looking at the newest version of Manjaro, and so that's why I'm looking at this. Someone else has also asked me to look at the newest version of EOS, Elementary OS. I'm a little nervous about doing that. I'm going to wait until it becomes public instead of trying the betas. I have seen some other reviewers do reviews of EOS in the beta forum, and they got chewed up and speed up and kind of jerked around by the developers, and I'm not too impressed with how they've treated people out there who say anything to the contrary of positive about their OS. I mean, it's just not right. I mean, there's going to be some good, there's always going to be some bad about everything. And I'm not impressed about how... I did a thing on EOS last year, and I mentioned how their main page had a donation section, and it almost implied to me that you had to donate before you could download it and try it out. And to me, it kind of seemed a little trickery. There was a small gray section underneath that said download it for free, which changed the values of their requested donation of $10 to 0. But I still I believe in supporting the developers as much as you can for the flavor you decide to choose. I believe in giving them stuff, but I don't believe in soliciting funds for something that you're trying to say is absolutely 100% free. Yeah. and I'll get off that soapbox because I don't want to start another war with people talking about how I understand developers do this out of the kindness of their heart, that they, like myself, have real jobs and they have to do this on their spare time too, and it's a thankless job. It really is. And you do your best to make something work and make it run, and you're never going to satisfy everyone. But I have gotten away from Manjaro. It's kind of focused back. This has been a great distribution this time around. I have really enjoyed it. Good to play with, good to run, has that stability of Arch and the fun of Arch, and you know, this is the first time I think that I've been able to install my favorite screen recording program, which is Simple Screen Recorder, and I was able to do it out of the Arch repositories instead of this. Yeah, you know what? You know, this first time where I didn't have to set up a special repository or anything. Now in Ubuntu, they have a repository set up that I can pull it, so I don't have to compile it there, but every other Linux distro I have to normally compile from source, and I didn't have to do it with Arch, so that's really cool. The AUR, the user repositories out there, have so much to offer. I think the biggest thing is just making sure that, you know, I didn't try too many things, making sure that the stability of the programs are good, and then going from there. So whether it's morning, evening, noon, or night, whatever you're having, I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for watching. Kind of went with the monochrome theme to go with the monochrome background. This is default Manjaro XFCE. Have a good time. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to hearing you for the next visit. Bye, guys.